The Dark Knight, the Caped Crusader, Batman. There's no other character in DC's lineup of heroes, not even Superman, that has as much commercial and critical success as our favorite spandex-wearing, villain-punching, meme-making goddamn Batman. From movies to video games to comics, if you slap the name Batman on it, chances are it's going to offer something decent to good and will make a fair amount of money. And when it comes to cartoons, there's no series that is well loved, highly regarded, or flat out just enjoyed like the 90s Batman the Animated Series. We're not talking about that this week. Trust me, as much as I love BTAS, and we will cover some episodes in the future, I feel like it's a tad oversaturated when it comes to YouTube, especially when a lot of the bigger YouTubers are people around my age who grew up with that show and remember it fondly. And while it does deserve all the accolades it gets, I'm wanting to talk about the Batman series that don't have as much focus. The one, for the most part, that flew under the radar for a lot of fans, including myself. It's time to talk about the 2004 series known as The Batman. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. We're approaching things a little bit differently from this point onward, folks. Cartoon series like The Batman here are fairly large, to the tune of 65 episodes over 5 seasons. That's a lot of cartoon to cover, especially within that 2-week time frame that I try my best to stick to. I asked your guys' opinion, and the response came back that I should split it up like how I've done with the Tenchi episodes. We probably won't have as much space between them as we did with Tenchi, but we'll see how things go. Getting to the Batman itself, the series was created back in 2004, developed by Michael Goguen and Dwayne Capizzi. I apologize for butchering your names, with the later of the two being responsible for some of the episode's scripts and the overall direction of the show. They also had Jeff Matsuda, who served as the major art director and character designer for the series. A point I bring up because he and Capizzi both worked on Jackie Chan Adventures, and the influence is immediately visible both in the look, feel, and even some of the story elements of the show. The Batman also has the dubious honor of being the rare TV series that aired at the same time as another series with both of them using the same character, as Justice League the Animated Series was just ending, with Justice League Unlimited starting up about the same time. This is also about when the Nolan Batman movies were being made, with Begins coming out about a year later. But this has also led to some issues, namely the Bat embargo. For those of you who are fans of Justice League and Unlimited, did you ever notice that after a certain point in that cartoon, we never saw any Batman characters other than the Dark Knight himself? That was the Bat embargo. Warner Brothers and DC, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they didn't want to have too many versions of the same characters running about in media, and were afraid that people would just get confused. In the case of the Justice League animated series, that meant that any character that wasn't Batman himself couldn't be used. This also applied to the Batman cartoon as well, as any Nolan-specific characters at the time, namely Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul, were also restricted, though apparently there are designs for the Scarecrow out there for this show. Speaking of the designs, that's actually something interesting to talk about. When the Batman was being made, one of the things that they specifically set out to do was to not just copy the animated series that came before them. This resulted in them wanting to really make the looks for some of the characters their own, and in some cases even rewriting the history of these characters as well. The series itself is designed for us to take a look at a younger Bruce Wayne, being only in his 3rd year as Batman. mostly a myth still thanks to focusing on taking out petty thugs and criminal organizations, it's with the start of the series that we get exposed to his first interactions with his classic rogues gallery, as well as getting to know the side characters and gimmicks of the show. Alfred, Bruce's butler/father figure, is pretty much one for one that we would see him in most other forms of media, caring and worrying about Bruce while helping him maintain the life of the Batman alongside that of Bruce Wayne. Though it's a constant thing throughout this first season for him to encourage Bruce to stop being Batman altogether. The other supporting characters are brand new, though, in the form of Ethan Bennett, a childhood friend of Bruce and a detective of the Gotham Police, and Ellen Yin, his new partner transferring over from Metropolis. The other major form of support that Bruce has in the show is the gimmick of the Batwave, something that Batman invented that gives him the ability to get instant updates on when crime is happening in the city, while also giving him remote control features on pretty much all of his gadgets, up to and including the Batmobile. I mostly call it a gimmick because, while not a bad idea and something I could see Batman making for himself, the way that it's featured in the show makes it feel like something they were just pushing onto kids for toys, which they did. Not a horrible thing, but it never felt like it was something that really worked or was cohesive to the show. Villains are what make the Batman, and our bad guys here are all fairly unique design-wise, but it's a bit of the roll of the dice as far as if there's anything that changes for their history. The Joker here, for example, is pretty close to how he's traditionally portrayed, a mad clown who's all about wanting everyone to either go insane or die laughing. The only major difference comes in how he fights and looks, having a straight jacket and bare feet, often fighting with his series of kicks. Penguin, on the other hand, while sticking fairly close to the short, beak-nosed villain from BTAS, actually has a few new wrinkles for how his story is presented. Instead of being shown to be a cultured criminal, he is instead shown to be a man who used to be on the same level of wealth as Bruce Wayne. In fact, the Cobblepot family used to have Alfred's family as butlers but were horrible to them. And while Penguin is still a villain, they instead make him much more of a foil to Bruce than they do to Batman, thinking he's more deserving of that role as popular billionaire playboy. The rest of the villains of the series go back and forth between these ideals, having a different design, idea for the character, and sometimes even backstory, when that's even brought up at all. Which actually brings us to one of the best and worst things about this show, the focus on the superhero action. What I mean by that is that the fights are more of the focus instead of Batman being a detective, learning and figuring out what's going on. Most of the time when Batman gets involved in an episode, it's because he's alerted by the Batwave. He rarely does much sleuthing outside of a quick Google search in most cases, and it rarely feels like we get to see the intelligence that the character is famed for. Instead, we get things like Batman getting a mech suit to fight against Bane, and a jetpack to go against Firefly. It's fun action, and more than enjoyable if that's what you want out of your hero stuff, but it was noticeable when it was never a matter of Batman outwitting his foes, as it was overpowering them. It's very much the intention from the creators, though, that they wanted the show in general to have a more superhero feel to it. Perhaps one of the best things about the show, though, is the fact that it's not afraid to have some form of continuity. Even for a more villain of the week show that this clearly is, we get recognizable nods to previous episodes that continue onward, like the aforementioned mech suit being featured again in a later episode with Catwoman. We also get the ongoing storyline of Bennett and Yin dealing with their boss wanting to bring in all the freaks of Gotham, including the Batman. It really brings in the feel that this is early on in Batman's life with how at odds he is with the police. Even with that continuity though, I don't think the stories here are particularly strong, but I think that's mostly because of that focus on superhero style stories I mentioned before. Outside of a single character, Mr. Freeze, we never really go super deep into any of the villains' backstories or what makes them tick. Joker's understandable, considering his history is something that's often a multiple choice, but nearly everyone else boils down to them either being thieves or mercenaries. The only outlier in this whole bunch is Clue Master, a character from the comics that got adapted into an episode here, and it's the only episode that he appears in the entire series, so I'll let that say everything there. For someone like me who's used to seeing these full episodes where we're focusing entirely on the villains from BTAS, a lot of them felt remarkably flat here. This could just be the fact that we only have 12 episodes in this first season, and 5 of them were given to Joker and Penguin respectively. One of the places that the show does shine, though, is its voice cast. While I'll still hold Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill as the king of their respective characters, Rino Romano does a great job as Batman and making me feel like he really is the Dark Knight.
If only the engineers at Wayne Industries knew their cutting-edge tech was being used to assist the Batman. Hate to disappoint, but I don't fight for sport.
Kevin Richardson's Joker takes a moment to get used to have such a big, booming, commanding voice coming out of the Clown Prince of Crime, but damn if he doesn't do a good Joker laugh justice. What's fun, though, is that we do actually get some actors that have played roles in other Batman shows to lend their voices here, such as Adam West having an episode where he is the mayor of Gotham. It actually makes me look forward to watching the rest of the series to see if I can figure out the voices of these characters before I start working on the episodes for those seasons. As an overall first season, the Batman is honestly better than I expected, though I'm clearly having some growing pains considering my near total isolation within Batman the Animated Series, considering just how many times I referenced it in this review. But let it not be said that I can't adapt and appreciate the different interpretations of the character like I've done with others, and while I kinda give a side eye at some of their choices, like letting Penguin have enough martial arts skill to fight Batman or his Kabuki twin henchwoman, it still feels like Batman in the end of the day. If you've never seen the show, I suggest checking it out, if only to see if a slightly different take on the Caped Crusader interests you. It might take some time for both the show to find its footing and for you to get used to the different style, but it's a promising start to a series that I do wish I had tuned in for when it was originally airing. It's a Batman we'll be revisiting in the future to see if he truly takes on the mantle of the Dark Knight. With all that said, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do so again in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with my content by subscribing and doing all the other things that gives us YouTubers life. If you wish to support me a bit more, I do have a Patreon where you can get access to bonus content. But until next time, stay frosty.